Join me as I dive into the world of freelance rates and challenge you to find out if you are leaving money on the table. Setting your freelance rate is key. It's how you make good money and value your work, but it's something that so many freelancers struggle with. We need to get this right. And it all comes down to the first and most common problem, which is underpricing. You are probably selling yourself short, working for less than you're worth. And this can lead to burnout and unhappiness. Why does this happen though? Well, often it's fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not getting hired, or fear of being too expensive in the marketplace. Now, you might also feel pressure to compete on low rates. And the result? Long hours for little pay. And underpricing has serious consequences. You earn less, you can be seen as low value in the market, your clients might think of you as cheap labor and not high quality professional. And this hurts your reputation and makes it harder to get good clients later on because you're over-servicing people who don't want to pay you what you're worth. Now, one reason why it's so hard to set the right rate is that it's confusing. How do you calculate your hourly or your project rate? How do you do that? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do right now. Okay, I'm going to show you how to calculate your freelance rate in a way that you're actually making money. You can reinvest in yourself. You can reinvest in the business. You can turn this into an agency business if you want, or at least have some tactical resources to help you get there. And this is really the key to thinking about how you want to price your services. Now, a few things. First of all, you notice that the categories I have here are low risk, I have implementation and full service. These are the three categories of business that I recommend that you have when you're making an offer to your clients using the service stacking method. I even wrote a book about it. Go to servicestacking.com if you want to check that out. But the idea here is that you want to minimize somebody's risk when they're working with you the first time. Then eventually, once you've minimized that risk with your first project, you actually it becomes riskier to not work with you than to work with you when you implement something in full service because you've identified the problem in the low risk area. And so ultimately the way that you price is the same for both. There's some rates up here. Let's just say for the demonstration purposes that you're not going to worry about strategic or tactical because this is you. And let's just say that you are at this level. So if you're charging, if you want to pay yourself $100,000 a year, that ends up being $50 an hour for what your rate would be. And that's how you can get basically what you get to. So what you're paying yourself. I'm going to always round up in this case. If you want to have odd numbers, you can just say no there. And then markup, put it at 300%. You won't regret it at all. Basically, $1 goes to doing the work. $3 goes to your company when you put 300% markup. The lowest that I can ever recommend that you do is 200%. And if you get really good at this and you have the supply and demand curves in place, like your supply curve is like really low and the demand curve is up here, you basically can raise your prices in order to get there. You could get up to 500, 600% markup. And that would mean that for every, you pay yourself or your team $20 and you make $100. That's what that would be. Or actually, that'd be even more than that. If you do 400% markup, that's 20 to make 100. If you do 500% or 600%, it's even better than that, okay? Because you got to factor in the original amount. So you pay the team $1,500, you make $9,000 in this case. Okay, so how do you build out an estimate? Like whatever your service is, how do you do that? So let's just say that you're doing AI integration for a company. You're helping them with that. Okay, what is AI integration or AI training even? That might be the low risk part of it because integration is more of a high risk. Okay, so what is that like? First of all, what services do you need to do? What are the steps to doing an AI training? One is gather needs of client for what do they need from you? Gather their needs. Okay, that might take you 2 hours. The next thing is plan your training. Now, if this is a custom training, it probably takes, for a custom training, I spend 3 hours for every 1 hour that I actually spend delivering it. So if you're doing a half-day training, that might be 12 hours to do a custom training. If you're doing this thing, if you've done it over and over again, you can lower your price because it won't take you 12 hours if you just do the same thing over and over again. But if it's custom training, then that's what you would charge for. Now, you'd have a different estimate if it's not custom. That's just how this works. What other things go into a training? Gathering questions for a client, So there's the needs and the questions. These probably sound pretty similar. Maybe they are. I'm doing this one off the cuff, just showing you how to fill this thing out. Then you have do the training, and that's a half-day training, so that's 4 hours there. Then you have field questions after, so that's maybe 2 hours, and then follow-up, and then sharing results. Pretty straightforward. So usually these things happen in a training. You can see you're actually doing 4 hours, but it's really 24 hours of effort. And if you're worth $50 an hour and you're going to put all this time into it, then yeah, it would cost you $1,200. This is just the amount of money you pay yourself by the number of hours. But if you mark it up, you could charge $7,200 if you're at 500% markup. Probably nobody's going to pay $7,200 for a half day, but I've personally charged $5,000 for a half day, or $2,000 to $5,000 for a half day, depending on what the needs are. And so you can say, hey, this is going to be $4,800 to do that training. And then they're probably going to say, oh, well, actually, I don't need the custom training. Can do you have a training you do for other people? Yeah, that one's only $2,800 because it's a standard training. So then they have the point you can say, do you want this to be custom to meet your needs, or do you want this to be our standard training? And as you can see here, there's less needs, less things to gather through. And so that's how you bring your price down. It costs half as much money. It takes you half as much time because you're talking with the client. That's how you really get your rates down. Now, the biggest mistake you can make as a freelancer is assuming that the client wants everything, but then not line iteming it out and not putting value to it and charging for it, because that's how you can basically, you can be at $1,200, but still only make the same amount of money, right? You can be way higher, but you don't even get a markup at all because you're not factoring it into there. So you'd really want to make sure that you always have that markup number. That's the one thing that I wouldn't skimp on, or I wouldn't go backwards with. I would just take stuff off the table. Now you might be wondering, okay, well, isn't that unethical that I'm charging, even though I only pay myself $50 an hour, that my company's charging $200 an hour for this thing? No. The value you provide is worth $200 an hour to them. If they were to hire somebody else to do it, it would be worth at least $200 an hour to them. You have the relationship, so they want to work with you, so that's worth something. And if you only pay yourself the $50 and charge them that, you have to work 2,000 hours a year in order to break even, in order to just be paid like an employee. But you're taking on way more risk when you're freelancing and when you're doing this on your own. You have to pay yourself. You have to pay for your health insurance if you're in the US. You have to pay for your computer. You have to pay for all these things that employees don't get. And so you need $3 extra going into the company, even while you're paying yourself, in order to reinvest in your business, in order to have profit, in order to reward yourself for that risk that you're taking to get there. That all makes sense. You have to do that, right? Okay, so what if you go into an industry that's dying, or what if you're working in an industry that's dying and you're trying to scrape by? Chances are your blended rate will be lower. Your rate will be lower here. The number of hours you can charge from are going to be lower. Everything's going to be a little bit worse because of the demand. So you might have a lower markup, and so you might see this one. We did $2,400 for an AI training. What if it's like a training on how to use COBOL, like an old mainframe? Actually, you can probably charge a lot for mainframe training if companies need it. But what if it's just such a saturated market, or training around how to use Microsoft Office, because that's what you're doing, and people are, there's not as many people there. Well, you still have these steps in here, but you're only worth $25 an hour because that's what the market will give you. You can only mark it up 200%. So even if everything else is the exact same, you can only charge $1,100 for it. So the same amount of time, same amount of everything, you have to charge less because there's not as much demand. It's not a growing industry that people pay a premium to, and you don't have a competitive advantage. So you do have to price in your competitive advantage to a certain extent, but that's actually, you can still have a margin at least. If you're only worth $25 an hour, that's fine. And if you're marking up, you're still making twice as much as you would have charged if you didn't go through this calculator. So it's still a net positive, even if you're charging $1,100, because you're probably only charging $360 normally, or even $500 normally, right? Even if you mark it up 100%, you're still at least making yourself like you're at least getting some money left over after you pay yourself so you can actually run a business. Otherwise, you're not really running a business. You're just an employee who has none of the stability of an employee, none of the stability of employment, none of the W-2 stuff, health insurance, benefits, computer bought for you, any of that stuff. And so that's the worst place to be. By far is the worst place to be is there. Okay, so we can get into these implementation offers, but I'm not really even sure it's necessary. I would encourage you to check out the calculator over at Measure U. Make sure you download that and see exactly how to do it. That should be a link in the description, link in the comment down here to go and check out the accompanying details behind this thing and to get on our list by downloading this calculator. And if you have questions, make sure you leave a comment on this video, or even better, go to themeasureu.com, join our community. Okay, now that I've shown you how to think about your freelancing rates and shown you a free tool that you can get in our community, here's a few more factors that will impact how you are setting your rates. You have market demand. Is your skill in high demand? Are people inquiring about working with you more than your capacity to do the work? Your skill level. Are you a beginner or an expert? What about industry standards? What do others charge in your industry? And then finally, what is your value? What are you bringing to the table? Okay, so what about examples? Here are a few examples about how you can set those rates. First of all, if you have a high demand skill, like leveraging AI, you can probably charge more than something that's been around for a while. For example, if you're in a saturated market, you might need to be more competitive with pricing because there's a lot of competition out there. What about experience? If you have more experience than other people, you are more valuable than a beginner and you can get more done in your time, and so you can charge more. What about industries? Some industries pay more than others, so make sure that you choose an industry where people are spending money. You got to go where the money is. Okay, so how do you know if you're undercharging? Well, a simple trick is like this. Look at your past projects, calculate how many hours you spent on them, divide the total earnings by the total hours, and this is what your real hourly rate is, your real hourly rate. But it doesn't factor in things like margin, doesn't factor in things like actually making money, just what you are getting paid to do something. And if your real hourly rate is less than what you should be charging, you are absolutely undercharging. And the key takeaway here is that your rate isn't just a number, it's about your value and expertise and meeting market demand. So setting the right rate is easier than you think. Think about the value that you bring to the table. Download the free calculator that we mentioned in the description and join our community to discuss your rates and make sure you're getting what you're worth. Okay, so what are your thoughts on freelance rates? Share in the comments and stay tuned for our next video on pricing strategies.